Alrighty, so I've decided that it's pretty important for me to talk about the fact that I'm a writer, and one that is struggling desperately to get published. This is important because, frankly, if I don't ever tell people that I'm trying to get published, no one's going to be able to help me get published. But I've avoided this most of my life, and frankly, there's a reason. It's because talking about the fact that I am struggling to get published makes me feel like a failure. All I've wanted to be since I was a child was an author. Like, yeah, I've had other small dreams along the way, including wanting to be a monster bad chicken at one point, but the dream that has been consistent was I want to be a published working author. And I haven't succeeded. When I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I thought this was going to be easy. Well, like, writing the book I thought was going to be the hard part, that I would struggle for years to get a good manuscript, and when it was finally ready, I'd send it out to, like, maybe 20 or so agents, and eventually someone would see that it's worthy and publish it. And yeah, I knew I wasn't going to be able to, like, live off of the proceeds from one book or two books, but maybe if I got 4 or 5 books published, I would have enough income coming in that I could focus on my writing. And that hasn't worked. At all. So, I'll talk about my journey as of so far. I have mostly been focusing on traditional publishing. If you do not know, there are really 3 main paths of getting a book published nowadays. There is traditional publishing, as in going with one of the big publishing houses, to do that you have to get an agent. Pretty much have to. There's also hybrid publishing, which is halfway between traditional and indie publishing / self-publishing, and then there is what I've heard referred to as indie publishing, but is traditionally just called self-publishing. Self-publishing is, of course, you're paying a company to publish your book. And my problems with it is it's relying entirely on you to take care of the marketing. You're the one that gets to choose where your ads are running, what ads are running, you're paying for these ads. You're the one that chooses what your cover art is, which is great, but you're paying your artist for your cover art. If you want an editor, you're paying for your editor. And that means that quite often it ends up being a good bit of money out of pocket to make a good book, though you can publish a crappy book for nothing. And there is ultimately no guarantee that it's going to go anywhere, even if it's a good book. Objectively, getting your book in front of eyes and readers is more than just writing a good book. You have to know how to advertise, how to work algorithms, how to get people to see your book, and importantly, to get the right people to see your book. And I don't have those skills. I did not take any marketing classes in college. Beginning to regret that I didn't, but I don't know how to do that. And also there's a big part of me that doesn't want to. I want to be a writer. I want to devote like 70% of my working hours to physically writing and editing my work. I don't want to devote 70% of my working hours to figuring out how to write a good Facebook ad. Like, that's not what I want, and I don't know how to do it. So I've focused instead on traditional publishing, because traditional publishing is the one that is built around the concept that somebody else is taking care of that. And yes, I acknowledge that in the modern era, a lot of traditional publishers even expect you to do a lot of the legwork of advertising your own books. And this is mostly by having a social media presence, which is why I've tried my best to build my Facebook into something that's more than just, hey, look, I look at it once every couple of months. But I'm not good at it. And if you're having a traditional publisher, because they have a stake in your book selling well, they will coach you at least slightly by like giving you a list of like, hey, you need to write 5 tweets today, you need to write 3 Facebook posts, they need to be about this length, they need to include this many images, they need to reference this many tag words or whatever. Like, there's somebody whose job it is to help you do that. And I need that. I can't do it on my own, obviously. But to get traditionally published, the first step is to get an agent. How you get an agent, or usually, you can actually submit manuscripts directly to a couple of publishers. The only one that I know of that is still accepting unsolicited manuscripts in the fantasy and sci-fi genre is Baen. And yeah, I'd be happy with Baen. They're a publisher that I feel like I fit in. But I've submitted 3 manuscripts to them. One I'm still waiting for a response to. The other 2 took more than a year to get a rejection. So be prepared for that. Most of the time you are, however, querying agents. To query an agent, you write a query letter, which is a cover letter for your book. It includes important things like how long your book is, how many words it is, what genre your book is. You'll often need to include some form of synopsis. You're usually looking at the really short back of the book blurb kind of synopsis. You don't have to tell how the book ends. They also usually want some information on you. They want a short bio, though not every agent seems to actually want one. And that's the other thing. The cover letters are supposed to be targeted at the specific agent you're querying. I'll get to that eventually. But, so you have the query letter. You also quite often will have, they'll request that you include the first 5 pages, the first 10 pages, the first 20 pages, the first 3 chapters, the first 25 pages, the first 30 pages, some amount of sample. And there's often a request as well for a separate synopsis. Now the synopsis, depending on which agent you're querying, is 1 to 2 pages, 2 to 3 pages, 3 to 5 pages, somewhere in there. Which is why you might actually end up having to write 2 or 3 synopses to cover all the different options. But the synopsis includes everything that happens in the book, including the ending. You'll also quite often have requests for your pitch, your elevator pitch, which is a 1-line description of what your book is that's supposed to, you know, draw people in. You also will have requests for comps, as in comparable books, books that are similar to yours, either tonally, situationally, environmentally, characterly, something that gives them an idea of what kind of book they're going to be looking at. You preferably want your comps to be something that has sold well and recently. They'll also request audience sometimes, like sometimes they'll ask, who is this book aimed at? And that can be something like, this book is for readers that are 13-year-old girls. This book is for readers of Game of Thrones. This book is for readers of fast-paced fantasy. There's a variety of different ways you can phrase it. And sometimes they'll ask for a more long-form bio of you, and if so, I know what this is for. This is for you to basically brag and tell them the ways that you are qualified to write this book. Can be qualified as in like, oh, I'm writing a book about being a spy in Russia in the 1830s, and I was a spy in Russia in the 1980s, or whatever. But quite often, this is literally just for things like, hey, I won this competition, I wrote this thing that got published, I am a tour guide like I am, and therefore my job is storytelling. Something to give them an idea that you can write books. So what happens once you've sent out your queries? You'll wait 2 to 3 months, 3 to 4 months, sometimes up to 6 months to hopefully get a response. Sometimes you get absolutely nothing and that is your response, but sometimes you'll get an actual rejection. Or once in a blue moon, if you're lucky, you might actually get a request for pages or even a request for a full manuscript. I will admit, I've only gotten like 1 request for pages, but I have gotten like 4 or 5 requests for manuscripts, so it seems to be that's the way the industry is going nowadays. But sadly, that's not the finish line. If you get a request for manuscript, there's still a chance you're going to be rejected. Like, one of the most depressing moments I've ever had was I got a request for a manuscript less than 24 hours after sending out a query, stayed up for 4 hours making sure that the manuscript was formatted the way the agent wanted, sent it off, and went to bed, and then woke up and already had a rejection from him. So, there's that. But the important thing is, hopefully, eventually, somebody will read the manuscript and go, yes, they're the person I want. And then you get to enter into negotiations with the agent. They'll make you an offer, and you get to decide whether that's a good offer or not. I know that a lot of places online suggest that you put your offer in front of a lawyer to have them look at it to see if it seems like a good contract, because you are objectively signing a contract with this person. But, like, honestly, at this point, if someone makes me an offer, I'm probably going to just say yes. So that's where I'm at. One other thing that I wanted to talk about that I did not earlier in the video is finding an agent, because of course you can't just like click your fingers and they're there. There are a couple of different websites online that I use for searching for agents. There are a variety of different kinds that you can just search, like agents that cover fantasy, agents that cover urban fantasy, agents that cover gaslamp fantasy. You can be very specific, you can be very general. Not all of them are accurate or consistent, so if you are using this video as advice, which I'm not sure you should considering how little success I've had, but be aware you should probably do more investigation than just manuscript wishlist or agentquery.com. Like, you should investigate them at their personal company's websites as well. Because also there have been a couple that I found on one of these lists that I then looked at and I was like, yeah, that's totally a scam. Or ones that I've looked at and been like, yeah, they expect me to do all my own marketing, which is literally what I'd be paying them to do. So I'm not entirely sure why the hell I'd pay them. I do know that I'm supposed to take the time to actually investigate each and every agent I send a query to, and I do some. I'm going to just be honest here and say I don't for everyone, because frankly, it takes too much time. And a lot of websites online are like, oh, don't waste the agent's time. I'm like, bitch, it's a one-page query letter. You can fucking read it and ignore it. I am not going to necessarily spend 16 hours investigating every single agent just to save you the time it takes to read one page. But let's delve into some bits of advice I've seen online, I've seen in videos, I've read in articles, and that people I know have given me. We'll start with the piece of advice that started me on this idea of making this video. A couple of people recently that I've talked to have suggested literary magazines, writing short stories and getting them published, and I will admit, that's not a bad suggestion. It turns out literary magazines are still a thing. I did not realize it until I investigated it a couple of years ago, but fantasy literary magazines still exist, are still publishing short stories, and as far as I can tell, are still being used by agents and publishers to find debut authors. And on top of that, if you get a short story published in one, you're a published author. You get paid for that, which sounds lovely. My big problem is I don't write short stories. I've tried, and they're not good. I struggle really hard with writing anything that's short and feels complete. The couple of short stories that I've actually written in my life, one of which actually I did send off for a competition in high school, and it won, but it was in high school. They're all the first chapter of a much longer book, and frankly, they feel like it. Even my mom, who is very kind about my writing, has said they feel like it. So I struggle with this. Now, that doesn't mean I've given up on it. Like, I am currently focusing on seeing if any of my projects would possibly work as short stories, but I struggle cutting down the length. There's always a word count that you're allowed to do, and half the time I'm like way over. There's something that I actually thought is it's meant to be the beginning of a book, but I've thought that maybe it would work as a short story, and I went to look at it all excited, being like, yeah, if it is, it's almost done. I only have like another maybe fourth of it to write before it's done and it's a good short story, and I'm already more than 1,000 words over the limit of the longest things they accept as short stories. I'm like, cool. So if I finish it, find a good ending, and then edit it dramatically, it might work as a short story. But I'm going to try. I'm going to try, because it's a way. Another piece of advice that a lot of people have offered me is build a platform, which, thanks. I'm trying. It seems that a lot of places nowadays, like one of the things, and yes, one of the things that agents often will ask for is, where's your website? How many followers do you have on Instagram? How many followers do you have on TikTok? How many followers do you have on Twitter? And like, I'm not great at social media, but I'm trying. I will admit I'm sticking to the ones I'm comfortable with because I've looked at some of the others, and like, I think maybe I could make Twitter work for me, though my inability to write short really sucks for Twitter. But I'm not entirely sure how to use TikTok as an author. And a lot of places nowadays are saying you should be on book TikTok. That's how you get published. But I don't get it. I've looked around, and book TikTok seems to just be pretty girls standing in front of bookshelves making expressions, while text goes over them that are usually just bad jokes about books. I might be missing something on this one, but I still haven't figured that out. Another piece of advice I see a lot in articles that I am very appreciative that no one has ever told me to do this in real life because I might snap at them is, you know, just write what's sellable at this moment, which I think is dumb as fuck. Like, yeah, if you're writing short stories, maybe focus on what's sellable at the moment, but when it comes to novels, like, I know I'm not exceptionally slow as an author, and at bare minimal, the one that I wrote during quarantine, so I was home all the damn time, and it still took me at least 7 months to write the book, plus the months spent editing it over and over again, and then thinking it's done, and then presenting it on YouTube to my mother, and then finding out that no, it was not done, and then doing another edit of it, and that's before I start querying it. So, like, when I start querying it, like, I'm still about, if I had written that book specifically aiming at following a trend that was popular in sales right now, I'd still be about a year behind. Like, unless you're psychic and know what's going to be popular in a year's time, I'm not entirely sure how I'm supposed to just write what's sellable at that moment. Whenever I go looking for advice on publishing online, which I do at least once every 3 or 4 months, and spend a downward spiral of looking at things and crying, there's always about 3 or 4 million articles that are titled How to Get Published, and just offer writing advice. A lot of people out there seem to think that the best publishing advice is just write better. And I understand where they're coming from. I know that a lot of people who are struggling to get published are probably struggling because the writing's not up to the quality of publishable material. And I understand that. And yeah, there's a little voice in the back of my head that says, that might be you. Yours might not be good enough. But then I read some of the shit that is published and I'm like, nah, I'm publishable. I may not be, like, award-winning, but I'm publishable. So I do find that advice a little bit patronizing and offensive, and most importantly, not helpful. What I'm looking for when I'm looking for publishing advice is how the fuck do I sell myself? And that's something I've struggled with my entire life. So where am I now? Well, I'm currently between projects when it comes to both writing and attempting to get published. There is a project that I finished earlier in the year. It has gone through a couple of different edits that I've had it up on YouTube for my mom to watch. It is still up there. And realized it was not done, so it's gone through a couple more edits since YouTube. But I think it's now at the point that it's ready to get sent out for queries. I've written the first draft of a query, but I need to write a couple more drafts before I get other people's opinions on it, and this time I'm going to be a big little girl and actually send it to friends and family and hopefully get other people's advice and edits and critique on the query letter. Then I'll have to write synopsis and all those other bits, and hopefully soon I'll be sending that one out to agents. Usually I'm immediately writing something else, and I'm not right now. I can't seem to focus in on one project, so it seems like the perfect time to see if I can make a short story happen. I'm both looking at projects that I have already started on, and trying to think of if there are any projects in my mind that would work for short stories. I'm struggling, but hopefully something will come of it. And I promised myself that this time when Bones of Stone was ready to send out, I was going to pay to have professional help. There are a couple of different sites I know of online where I can pay for a workshop or a forum or some kind of discussion with an agent about my query. And I'm gonna do it. Though it might have to wait a little bit because, what with the pandemic and the hurricane, I've worked a grand total of 7 shifts this entire month. So extra expenditure seems like a little bit of a, I'll wait for next month kind of thing. Beyond that, I'm not sure. I guess I'm just gonna keep going until I get somewhere. I might continue making more vlog videos about this process as I go along. Partially because I actually haven't seen that many vlogs about the process during it. I've seen a lot of people posting things like after the fact, talking about here's how I did it. And a lot of them have been super unhelpful to me because they're people who already have a platform, already have a successful YouTube channel, and are like, yeah, of course you're gonna publish me. I have 60 million followers on Insta Twitter. But maybe it will be helpful to somebody out there just to see somebody who's still working on the process and struggling, and I don't know the answers to a lot of questions. I'm trying. Some of the answers that I have, I am not sure are accurate, but I'm doing what I can. And yeah, if anyone out there finds this useful, then something good comes of it.